An angel appears at a faculty meeting and tells the dean that in return for his unselfish and exemplary behavior, God will reward him with his choice of infinite wisdom, infinite wealth, or infinite beauty. And right away, without hesitating, the dean selects infinite wisdom. Done, says the angel, and he's gone in a cloud of smoke. And all of the heads turn towards that one dean who sits surrounded by a halo of light. And at length, one of his colleagues whispers, "Say something." And the dean looks at them and said, "I should have taken the money." Today's texts might be taken together to mean something about our own quest for wisdom and what we do with our wisdom once we acquire it. Now, if I had included the First Testament reading here this morning, we would have heard about the death of King David and how he went to sleep with his ancestors in the city of David. And then King Solomon, who took the throne, and he was a man of wisdom. And of course, there's some folklore about King Solomon, and it makes for nice poetry. It's said that the 3 books in the Bible written by King Solomon are the Song of Solomon when he was young and full of love and life and vitality. Proverbs was written in his maturity, and Ecclesiastes was penned when he became old, cynical, and despairing of hope. Well, it's a nice story. But one of today's readings is from Proverbs. Wisdom, who is always portrayed as a woman, calls to the foolish and to the wise to live and to walk in the way of insight. And how we learn to do that from here is up for us to learn. In fact, some of the wisdom sayings that are found in Proverbs came from a contemporary source in Egypt at about 1000 to 600 BCE, and they may have been passed along from there. So I have a slide here. Here's some comparisons, the wisdom in Egypt and the wisdom at the temple. The Egyptian book of Proverbs was known as the wisdom of Amen-Em-Opet. Hear how close they are. Bend your ear and hear the words of the wise. Apply your mind to my knowledge, for it will be a delight if you guard them within you. And Amen-Em-Opet, chapter 1, give your ear and hear what is said. Give your heart to understand it. Putting them in your heart is worthwhile. Wisdom is universal, but as Theodore Levitt from the Harvard Business School puts it, experience comes from what we have done. Wisdom comes from what we have done badly. We need to recognize wisdom in the need to protect ourselves now from both internal and external forces. Many of us are imprisoned by anxiety or depression, trauma, family of origin issues. And as we learned from last week's news in Pennsylvania, thousands of children growing up, decade after decade, being abused by the very people whose call it was to create safe faith communities. In the era of governmental chaos and anxiety, fear is rampant. And then we worry about the fate of the earth, along with constitutional protections. The powers that threaten us are often greater than we can bear, and they threaten to undermine our spiritual and our emotional integrity. Our hope in responding to them is found in trusting God in community for our healing and sustaining and aspiring, all of these things, to live by the highest and best standards despite the challenges of life. And we also need, I think, a community to uphold us in prayerful support. No one is ever made whole alone. We need a cloud of witnesses, a community of love to sustain us in life's challenges. We know those challenges. When the diagnosis comes, in the doctor's smile and her grace on her lips. When the beginning of the round of chemo or radiation that leaves you wondering just how bad it will be. When navigating the waters of separation from spouse or friend or family member, when processing the untimely or even sometimes expected death of someone that you always thought was going to be there. Isaac Asimov said, "The saddest aspect of life right now is that science gathers knowledge faster than society gains wisdom." In Ephesians, it says, "Be careful then how you live, not as unwise people, but as wise, making the most of time because the days are evil." Theologian and pastor Dr. Bruce Epperly writes, "The author of Ephesians focuses on the spiritual and moral virtues as our greatest protection because often in difficult times we are tempted to vengeance, self-interest, fear, hatred, greed, and protection. Our souls can easily shrivel in times of personal and relational and physical challenge. We need, as Dostoevsky proclaims, to be worthy of our sufferings." He says we need to become large-souled, world-loyal people, compassionate and yet firm in times of trial. We need a sign staked on our front lawn to remind us that we should both picket and pray. Viktor Frankl notes that everything can be taken away from a person except for one freedom, and that is one's unique responses to life's challenges, and difficulties do not excuse us from moral goodness. We are largest in stature when we face life's challenges with love and equanimity. On the cross, Jesus forgives his enemies. Their hate cannot determine his purpose or his response. His love is stronger than their fear. So I don't believe in personifying evil. I'm sure you've kind of gained that by now, but you can feel forces. It just feels like you can feel forces of fear and anger and destruction just stepping out of the shadows these days. Some with Confederate flags, others wielding automobiles as weapons, some waging war on women's equality and refusing service to LGBT people, some separating children from their parents, some railing against a free press and diversity. Epperly says the highest levels of government intentionally promote chaos and division and normalize incivility and dishonesty. Christians are still called to a different kind of life from that practiced by many around us. We need to be people who are wise but filled with the Spirit, and it is written, the highest form of wisdom is kindness. We learn this by eventually realizing that what we dislike in others often has something to do with our own shadow self. Rumi, writing in the 13th century, said, "Yesterday I was clever, so I wanted to change the world. Today I am wise, so I am changing myself." The old hymn says, "Grant us wisdom, grant us courage for the living of these days." In a short 2-3 weeks, I promise, we will be enjoying the fruits of what we have most recently done together. To paraphrase Isaiah chapter 40, we will make straight new concrete paths, and the mountains of dirt and the hills of interlocking plastic walkways will be brought low. The uneven ground shall become level, and the straight places will be landscaped with shrubbery. Thank you for being on this journey with me. We've been talking about what we're about to finish for 9 years. It's been a long journey, but then it took 20 years for Solomon to build the temple. So thank you for being on this journey, but let's prepare to live into our new expanded space with the intention of being the church that God is calling us to be. Wisdom has built her house. And I hope we're at a place where we can take a deep breath. Good. And look into each other's eyes with the same love and respect and forgiveness despite the discombobulation whenever it is needed, and a desire to move forward in our mission together. And it always starts with now. Life is a series of now and now and now and now again. And so with this now, I invite you to come in about 25 minutes to join us in Plummer Hall, where we'll be discussing the Israeli-Palestinian situation. And we'll have more space after that to host even more. So let's rise in body and spirit, or in spirit, and sing the Alleluia.